Hi all, welcome to week 6. I am trusting that you are all keeping up on the reading. I'm aware that I'm not overtly asking about it as often in this class as I might in some courses. I'm not quizzing you on it. You will need to demonstrate in this week's writing assignment that you're keeping up on the reading because there are some concepts that are coming directly out of the reading. But I'm just trusting that you are wanting to get the most possible out of this course. So of course you would keep up with it. And remember what I said early on, that if you arrive on a chapter that really doesn't pertain to what you're hoping to get out of a storytelling course, then you have every permission from me to read quickly, not to just skip it, because there may be concepts that will surprise you and inform what you do hope to do. So I also hope that in everything that we do that you are diving deeply into how you personally might use it. I know there are some of you out there who may aspire to write a novel, write a short story, maybe write some poetry. And if any of you are interested in any kind of mentoring beyond this class, I'm more than happy to. And some of you are thinking, yeah, no thanks, not for me. But in that case, then I want you imagining how you might use this level of very effective, fine-tuned writing and storytelling in order to best connect with your clients, your patients, your customers, your coworkers, your bosses, your family members, whoever it might be in your realm. There absolutely is a way that you can use this, and it's not just about writing a lyrical poem or rhyming something. It actually is about storytelling, and storytelling is such a focal point of our culture right now. I hope that you see that. Back when I did my bachelor's degree was in journalism. I had an English professor who told me once, and I think he intended it as a compliment, but I'll tell you, back at age 19, I didn't really take it that way. He said that he saw me as a good writer, but that he advised me to wait until I was 40 before I actually started writing. And I thought, well, that was rude. Because certainly at 19 or whatever I was, maybe 18, I knew plenty about the world and I knew how to construct a sentence effectively, and I was just going to ignore that. Now, there was some blessing in that because as a journalist, I had to dig in and just start writing. And really, this English professor was referencing my ability to craft, I think, an effective fictional story with the depth and nuance that comes from living. And now that I'm well past 40, I would say that he was absolutely right. Not sure that I would give that advice to somebody who's 18, 19, 20, 21, because it's probably never going to be well received. Or you could perhaps word it differently. But my word to you based on that is all of you have a depth of understanding about what life is and what it can be and the places that it can hurt, that your ability to craft a story well is already heightened and already where it needs to be. So really what we need to do is help you learn certainly the components of story, which is what we've been focusing on in all of our time together, but also about slowing time enough that you can really focus on the moment when you're telling the story, and also being very, very intentional about how you punctuate your own voice. So here that I'm not just saying very, very intentional about mechanics. Yes, essentially that is what I mean, but you all have unique and effective voices. I can hear them in the videos and I can hear them coming up, I would say off the page, but really it's out of my screen as I'm reading your work, and we all are reading one another's work. And so what I want to help you do is learn to punctuate your own voice. That doesn't mean change your voice to meet some standard. It means if I've told you that you have a sentence fragment or that you have a run-on sentence, there's an easy answer to that. There are rules, and it's not just a single way to punctuate it. There are a multitude of ways that are effective and proper and follow the basic rules, but maintain the natural rhythm of how you speak, of how you order your ideas, and how you bring a good story to the rest of us. So after I had that English professor and then a couple more years of college as I finished my degree, I graduated at the height of a recession. So there were no jobs. And here we were all told, get your bachelor's degree and then you can emerge at, 21 and there'll be a job waiting for you. Absolutely not the case. There were people standing on the street corners in big cities and medium cities asking for money, asking for employment. And so when you had very little work experience, it was a challenging time to graduate. So I looked at a map of the United States and I found the city where I thought there were the most possible opportunities for a newspaper journalist to actually land a job in my line of work. And so I moved to Chicago. I was actually in Portland at the time. I was a reporter for the Oregonian, but that was just a 3-month stint. It was actually an internship after I graduated, and so I knew that was ending and there were no permanent jobs. The Oregonian wasn't hiring at the time, and so I picked up everything, packed it into my ancient Honda Accord with cracked windows and divots in the hood, and I got myself all the way out to Chicago. And of course, for the first month or so, I applied for all kinds of jobs and there were none, but I had my fallback. I assume all of you had your fallback at some point. I was a waitress and I was a good waitress, and so I knew that I could wait tables, and so I did in Chicago at a diner for many weeks, what I thought might be years, but it ended up being weeks because I did land a job at a wire service, which that's not as known of a concept today just because journalism has morphed into something entirely different from what we were all trained to do. By the way, we were all trained in media law, media ethics. We took years of courses in this stuff and we emerged as professionals. And those days, at least for now, seem to be gone, which is disappointing to me. I'm glad I'm not in that line of work anymore. But anyway, we at the wire service, what we were trained to do was to be the first on the scene, and then the other newspaper reporters and television reporters and radio reporters would see what we were putting out over the wire, and they would determine whether or not it was a story that was worthy for them to send people to cover. And so we were obligated to be first on the scene and to know the right questions to ask immediately. Often it was crime that we were covering, not always, but sometimes it was school board meetings and political situations, but often it was crime. And so I was typically I was assigned to the west side of Chicago and the south side of Chicago. If you know much about that city, those are areas that are high crime. And when I was there in the 90s, I was most often in the neighborhood called Englewood, which at that time was the highest murder rate in the United States. And sometimes I remember thinking when I got back home, and I worked late shifts, so I often would get home at 4 in the morning and then sleep and not go into work until 4 in the afternoon. And I remember thinking, I wonder if other people fear for their lives when they go to work every day. And in a curious way, unlike perhaps a police officer or somebody who's in that line of work, I didn't get to carry a weapon. So I had my pepper spray in my hand as I'm shuffling my notebook and my pen in my other hand. And by the way, no cell phones back then. My boss had a cell phone, and it was one of those like briefcase size cell phones, but we didn't have cell phones because they didn't exist yet, at least in the way that we know them now. And so I'd have to go find a payphone every time I had a story to call in. And so I'd be standing in the payphone with my foot braced against the door to keep somebody who's intoxicated from bursting in, or somebody who's intent on committing a crime. And I'd have my pepper spray in the other hand and the phone here, and then I'd have my notebook, and I'd be trying to dictate the story directly into the phone. And there were times that I would emerge from the phone booth and I would hear my story coming out over the radio. So room for error was very, very small to zero, basically. And there were people that I met who really changed my life forever because I got a little glimpse inside of their story, inside of their world, inside of really generational stories, things that repeat, because we all pull on these lenses, and that's what we've been digging into as I've asked you to dig into your characters, into your audience, into describing it in as much detail as you possibly can. It's exposing you to the many, many lenses that we all put on as we live our lives. And a lot of us, all of us really, come to it with generational lenses, some that we reject, some that we repair, some that we replace, and some that we just take on and never know that we actually put those lenses on. And so it was a very eye-opening time, a lot of years of realizing that my life maybe was so different from theirs, but then there were so many things that were so much alike. And so there were parts of it that were really exciting and heartwarming, and parts of it that were really difficult. And probably for me, the most difficult part was to walk away from the story. So each time I would go into work, I would actually get an envelope full of things that I was supposed to cover. And then I would sit sometimes at a kitchen table with a mother who had just lost a daughter or a son to crime on the streets. And then I would have to leave. And that was always difficult. And I'd have to bounce on to another story. And in all of this, I want you recognizing a couple things. Number one, what I said already, which is all of you in this class have lived rich, full lives up to this point where you have ample stories to draw from. Not just to create some kind of fiction, although goodness knows, go do that if you feel called to it, but just to create story by which to tell the next story. And then the second thing I want you to realize is that we are craving it in our culture unlike any other time that I've seen, certainly in my lifetime or even in studying history that I've seen. We need story in order to connect as human beings. And so when we go to a book, when we go to the newspaper, those of us who are old timers and actually still take a newspaper, or we do it online, or we go to some kind of a magazine, or we go on the web and we start reading the news, or we go to social media, what are we seeking? Sometimes we're seeking sheer information. Sometimes we're seeking an escape of some kind, but more often than not, what we're seeking is human connection. We want to know if we're the only ones who are feeling this way, or are other people feeling the same way, and am I a little bit crazy, or am I normal, whatever that might be. And that's why we're sharing and reading one another's stories. So as a person who's learning how to craft this story most effectively, I hope that you will ponder every possible way that you're already using story. And we tend to do it naturally without digging into the components. And so this course is to help you dig into those components and realize how to use them the most effective way possible. And so I want you really focusing on two things this week. Number one, slowing down. And I mentioned that already. So what that means is when you come to a scene, it's not just about thinking about, okay, here's the scope of the scene, and so I'm going to start back here to give somebody a backdrop and then tell it chronologically. I want you to actually consider how you might throw your people, your readers, your audience straight in. What would that feel like? Because really in a work email, I, in most cases, would rather that somebody do that because I don't have a lot of time, and so they just get to the point, right? Jump straight in. So it correlates there as well. But if you were to jump straight onto the beach where we're walking with you in your shoes across the sand, or straight into a cafe where I don't yet know who the players are here, but I can figure it out pretty quickly, and so the conversation is already happening. And what if you throw us into a field where actually there are cows over there by the fence, and why? And why am I there? Why am I in the middle of a pasture? Throw them in, and then as a writer, freeze time. And when you freeze time, I want you to think about all of your five senses. And could you describe through all of them, or should you pick just one or two? That depends on what? It depends on your purpose, your audience, and who you are as the writer. So that Aristotle's rhetorical triangle comes into play every time. And so the first thing, again, is I want you to slow down time. The most effective writing assignments, the A writing assignments in this class, have not been necessarily the longer ones. They've sometimes been the shorter ones, hitting that page requirement, of course, but maybe a page and a half, 2 pages that very effectively slows down time. Because when you slow down time, it's not that it slows it down for your readers. It makes it so your readers have space to enter in with you and experience the moment with you, rather than hearing you tell it to them, which sometimes gets dull, right? We have so many people telling us things all the time that it gets exhausting. But when we are given permission to enter in, that, my friends, is engaging. And that's where we experience the human connection. And the second thing is to be so very intentional about how you punctuate your own unique voice. So, how long are your sentences? How long are your paragraphs? Where do you put the comma and why? And if I'm commenting to you that you have run-ons or you have sentence fragments, why? What is the punctuation that can effectively punctuate your own voice? I'm not asking you to fit some kind of a general standard so that we all end up sounding the same, because that would be horrible. I'm asking that you use intentional decision making about every punctuation mark that you choose to use and every word that you choose to use. Be so intentional about it and understand the rules so well that you know how to punctuate your own voice on the page, because all of you have a very effective voice. I've heard you speak in your videos, and I've heard you speak as I read your writing and it comes out of the screen at me. So how can I help you learn to punctuate your own voice? So slowing it down, number one, and intentionality about every single word, every punctuation mark, every length of the sentence, length of a paragraph, and every way that you present your work on that screen. I want you to be intentional. Let me know if you have questions, and if you're behind at all in our course, you can go on the gradebook and see what you need to see, but please reach out to me so we can get you caught up. Blessings on your week.